Hi, everybody. Sorry for the wait. We experienced a little bit of technical difficulties this morning, but we appreciate you joining us here at the Aquarium Online Academy. I'm Stacy here at the Aquarium of the Pacific, and today we're going to be taking a look at some of the animals that you see here behind me. Now, I am not alone in the studio. I have a couple of my friends here helping us out. We have Talia on the computer here in the studio that will help us, and she will help us see all of the really cool images and videos that we have in store for you. And then my friend Carrie is over at a different computer and will be receiving questions that are texted by you. That's right. You can actually send questions, thoughts, observations, all of those sorts of things into the studio here. And if you include your name, I'll even say your name here in our program. Now, if you do want to text us, go ahead and give us a text here at this number. It's 562-286-1838. Again, it's 562-286-1838. Now, for our younger viewers, please make sure that you do ask for permission because texting rates may apply. Now, if you are not watching this live and you still want to interact with us, you still have questions, you still want to share your thoughts, please feel free to just email us. We have an email address specifically for our online aquarium, and that is live@lbaop.org. LIVE at lbaop.org. Okay, so I hope that you are all ready to take a look at some amazing animals, especially birds. We're going to be looking at all kinds of different birds. Well, maybe just a few specific types, groups, perhaps. But first, let's try to figure out what makes a bird a bird. How would you know that an animal is a bird and not a fish? Or it's a bird and not a mammal? Well, this here is a bird, right? Yes. Well, what do we see on this animal that makes us think, yes, definitely a bird? Well, one of the things that you can't really see, but it is part of what makes a bird, is its backbone. Now, while we talk about the backbone, make some observations of this bird here. This bird is called a rainbow loriket. We do have them here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. We have them in this really amazing aviary. And you can even buy a little cup of nectar and feed them so you can kind of see what they're like up close. That's really how they like interacting with people, is just if you feed them. So, while we talk about that backbone, take a look at this bird. What about it makes it a bird? Okay, now that backbone, it is just like us. We have a backbone as well because we're called a vertebrate. A vertebrate is an animal that has a backbone. Now you can feel your backbone. It's all up and down the very middle of your back. If you felt right there, you may have felt some bumps. Those bumps are the bones in your back or your spine. Okay, so that's a really important part of our bodies because it helps us to stand up straight or sit up straight. It's one of the things that allows us to walk around. Okay, your backbone does a lot of things for you. That's one of the reasons why we're not just a pile of goo on the floor. So backbones are important. Now, they're not just important to us, but they're important to all of the animals that have one, including a bird. All right, what else did you notice that made you think, yes, definitely a bird? Well, it has some other things in common with us, like they do have feet. Okay, we have feet too. They have a mouth. We have a mouth too, but their mouth is a little different, right? What kind of mouth does a bird have? It has a beak or a bill. And that beak or bill is what it uses to eat food. Just like we use our mouths to eat food, they use theirs to eat food, but it's just shaped a little different and it's made of different stuff. We have an observation, an idea, a thought, and I love it. Please remember, send in those texts. All birds have feathers, and you are right. Feathers are a really important part of being a bird. Now look at all these feathers. They're beautiful, aren't they? I love the rainbow colors of our rainbow lorikeets. Now, I actually have some feathers for us to look at a little bit closer because here you can see feather ring, but you can't see the whole feather. The feathers are attached to the skin, just like our hair is kind of attached to our scalp, right? Or you can look on your arm and see the hair coming from your skin there. So that's what we have. We have hair because we're mammals. Well, birds have feathers. Let's take a look at a whole feather and see what they kind of look like. Now, I have this really cool camera called a document camera. It gets us up close to some smaller objects. So here we go. This is my document camera. You can see my hand there. I have some feathers here from a loriket. Now let's look closely. Wow. They're pretty spectacular, aren't they? Now, are all of these feathers the same? Do you see some differences? What are some of the differences you see? I think the color is really easy to see the difference, right? The colors are different on these feathers, but we know that those rainbow lorikeets had a lot of different colored feathers. What else do you notice that might be a little different? Now, if you look here, it's really fluffy at the bottom of this one, and that one, and these ones are also a little bit smaller. But look at this one. It's not as fluffy. Even the shapes are a little bit different. This one is big and it's a little bit more oval. This one here has like a point on the end. This one's a small oval. This one looks almost like a circle. So the feathers can be different depending on where they are on the body, because some of these feathers are used for flight. Okay, some of the feathers help them to fly. Some of the feathers are used more for warmth. Some of those feathers are used to be flashy and pretty, to make all the other animals say, hey, wow, that's a good-looking bird. Must be very healthy. That's a good sign. So there's a lot of different reasons why they actually have feathers, and the feathers can be used for different things. That the uses can also overlap a little bit too. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why you're going to find different kinds of feathers, even on the same bird. But yes, birds definitely have feathers. Excellent. Now, another quality of birds things that birds can do that we cannot do is lay eggs. So one of the other things that makes a bird is that they lay eggs. Now, are birds the only animals that lay eggs? I bet you can think of some other animals that lay eggs too, right? Like fish. There are some fish out there that lay eggs. There are lots of reptiles out there that lay eggs. So birds are also one of those egg-laying animals. And as you can see here is a penguin with a little egg right there. Now, what's really cool with these eggs, it's a whole lot like a chicken egg. It looks really similar to a chicken egg. Wait a minute. Is it because chickens are birds? Yes, absolutely. So they have a lot in common with penguins, with lorikeets, with puffins too. Now, these eggs are pretty amazing. The baby develops inside of it, and there's a yolk inside. So if you've ever eaten an egg, that circle in the middle, that's the yolk. And that's the nutrients for the baby when it's growing inside the egg. Now, what's cool is if you candle an egg, so you shine a light in it, you can even see the yolk or the baby develop. All right, so that's a really, really amazing thing. You can actually watch the baby developing. You don't want to crack into the egg because the egg is its home until it's ready to hatch. So we want the egg to stay intact. So this is a great way to check out what's going on inside. Now, remember how we were saying a little bit earlier that their mouths are that beak? This is a different bird, right? This is a penguin, not a lorikeet. And take a look at that beak. Now, are their beaks the same? No, they're not. This one here seems like it's a lot longer, and it's a darker color too. Why do you think a beak would be different? I'm going to let you sit on that for a little bit. We'll talk about beaks a little bit more very, very soon. So we did get the observation that they do have beaks. Very nice job. Absolutely, birds have beaks or bills. They're basically the same thing, like a duck bill is like their beak. All right, we have Mireille saying, let's see, for penguins, why do dads watch the eggs? Well, it's more than just the penguins. In fact, it's a lot of birds out there. They have two parents. They have the mom and the dad, and they actually take turns taking care of those eggs because, as we were seeing with those eggs take a lot of work. Those eggs have to stay warm. Actually, you know, another quality about a bird is that they are warm-blooded. That means their inside of their body has to stay the same temperature all the time, very similar to us. So when it's really cold outside, you might get cold, right? So what do? We put on a blanket or a jacket, and that's how we can stay warm. I don't know if there are any emperor penguin-sized jackets out there. I don't think they have stores to buy them, right? So instead, they're going to have those feathers that are going to help them stay nice and warm. So feathers are actually really, really important. And we'll talk a little bit more about how they're used for different birds as we look at those different birds. But if the bird itself needs to stay warm, it also means the egg needs to stay warm. So in order for that egg to stay warm, it needs to have a parent around to take care of it. That's one of the reasons why in that other picture that we saw, the penguin was kind of sitting on top of the egg. Well, that's how they keep them warm. Their body is warm, right? So it gives off some heat. And so when they sit on it, they don't actually sit on it. It's not like how we sit on a chair. Because if they did that, it's possible that that thing would break. So it's not all of their weight on the egg, but they're kind of surrounding it and huddling it with their body so that it can be surrounded by those warm feathers, and it gets warmth from the body of the penguin. And so that's how they stay nice and warm. So they're going to take turns. Mama penguin's going to sit on it for a little bit, and the daddy penguin can go and get some food, and then they'll swap. So it's teamwork, and that's really what it's all about, to make sure that baby hatches nice and healthy. Now, we have Ryan asking, why do the birds sit on eggs? Now we know, right? So it's sitting on an egg to keep the egg warm. If that parent didn't sit on the egg might get cold. And if it stays cold for too long, the baby's not going to be able to hatch. It won't survive. And so that's why it's so important for those parents to sit on the eggs, but also why it's so important for the parents to have teamwork. Because otherwise, I don't know, they would get really hungry, I would think, if they weren't able to take a break and then go feed. All right? I know I would get real hungry. So that's kind of how it goes with an egg. So now we know, in order to be a bird, you need a backbone, you need a beak, you need feathers, and you lay eggs. Now, we don't do that. That's why we're not birds. But we have a lot of birds in our world. In fact, I bet if you looked outside, you might even see some. Now, it may not be immediate, because sometimes there are areas that don't have birds all the time. But I bet you if you were able to look around, especially in a green space like a park, you might be able to see some birds hanging out. Now, let's take a look at some really amazing birds. Now, this class is called Puffins to Penguins. So let's take a look at puffins and penguins. Now, first we're going to pull up these two. Do you know which one is the puffin? Well, maybe you haven't heard of a puffin before. Do you know which one is a penguin? I think a lot of us have heard of penguins, right? That one. This is the penguin. That means this one over here is the puffin. I want you to take a very good look. Let's make some observations, okay? Take a very good look. What are some of the things that you see that are the same? And what are some of the things that you see that are different? Okay, so they have some things in common because they are both birds. But they have some things that are different because they live in a different space. They have kind of different lives. But they're both seabirds. They both live and depend on the ocean. So what are some of the things that you notice that are the same, and what are some of the things that are different? Now, one of the things that I see that is the same, at least pretty close to the same, is the color of their body. Did you notice that too? Their bellies are white. Look at that little belly. And look at that little belly. Those bellies are white. But what about their backs? The back of this one, we can't see it, but the back of this one we know is black, right? And the back of this one is also black. So their bellies are white and their backs are black. You know, this is actually a really common thing in the ocean, not just for seabirds or ocean birds, but for a lot of animals out there in the ocean. Think about a killer whale, an orca. They are the same color, right? The white belly and the black back. Now, this is a really important feature for animals in the ocean. In fact, even if you were to look at a shark, a lot of sharks are going to be lighter bellied and darker backed. And that's a form of camouflage. Now, do you know what camouflage is? You've heard that before, right? Camouflage, if you haven't, or maybe if you just needed a reminder, camouflage is how an animal can hide in its environment or in its habitat. Now, sometimes it's shape, sometimes it's color, sometimes it's even pattern. Here, this camouflage we're talking about is color. Now, it doesn't seem like black and white is very good camouflage, right? But it is when you're in the water, because the ocean can be a little bit on the darker side, especially if you look down towards the ocean floor. When you look down towards the ocean floor is very dark. And so when these birds are swimming, their bellies are on the bottom and their backs are on top, okay? So if you were to look down at the top of them, all you'd see is their dark back, and that blends in with a dark ocean floor. Whereas if you were underneath them and you were looking up when they're swimming, you would see that light-colored belly, and that would blend in from the sunlight that's coming from the surface of the ocean. So it's really amazing that black and white can actually be great camouflage. Okay, so we know that their colors are the same. We also know they're both birds, right? So they have feathers. They both have beaks for mouths. They have eyes. We can see that. They have really cute little feet. They do lay eggs, even though we can't see that here. And of course, they have skeletons too. Now, that is a really great question. We got a question from Maisie. Why are their beaks different? I love that you noticed that they're different. Here's the funny thing. They kind of eat kind of similar food, maybe a little bit different. Now, this penguin here is going to go after small fish, but also these little shrimp-like things called krill. It's the same thing that the really big whales eat. So they're kind of small. Now, a penguin, the penguins actually tend to swim around, and when they find something, they eat it. So it found a fish, it eats a fish. It finds some krill, it eats a krill. It finds another fish, it eats another fish. This other animal over here, the puffin, has a different way about it. They do like to eat fish, especially fish. Now, they can eat some kind of bigger fish, and if they eat that, they would just eat the whole thing in one gulp. But what puffins are really well known for, take a look at those super cute puffins. What they're really well known for is eating mouthfuls of fish. Just imagine an entire mouthful of little tiny fish. Now, how would they capture that fish? Well, its mouth is different than the penguin, and this is what they do. They dive into the water where there's a school of these teeny tiny fish, and they catch as much as they can in one grab. They can use their tongue to hold the fish onto the roof of their mouth and get another bite of more fish. And then they can use their tongue to hold it and get another bite of fish. And that's how they can collect so many fish. Can you count how many fish are here? It's really hard to do, right? But I see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7? Maybe? It's really hard to tell. But that's a lot of fish in one mouthful. Now, the really cool thing is when they're doing that, it allows them to be more efficient. That means they use a little less energy to catch their food. Now, it's really important for animals to not use too much energy when catching their food, because if you use a lot of energy, you need to eat more food, right? So one of the big differences is this animal is more efficient in catching a bunch of little fish in order to eat them. Now, all of these little fish right here, it can actually take to its nest. It can fly back to land and maybe feed the babies or share some of that for themselves too. So that's one of the reasons why they're able to catch so many fish. And why their beak shape has to be different to allow them to catch so many fish. So great observation, Maisie, for noticing that those beaks are different. Now, since we are looking here at this cute puffin, let's take a look at some of the other things about puffins. Now, another thing I noticed about the beak too that's different is the colors. Those are really beautiful colors, right? Well, just as I was saying earlier for the lorikeets and their feathers and how there's so many different colors, the color that you see here in their beak and even in the eye, all of that is a way to show off how healthy they are. So when they have bright colors, when they have really good looking feathers, those are all signs of health. And animals that are healthier tend to get a mate a little bit easier. So a boyfriend or girlfriend, a little bit easier. So those really bright colors help them with that. There's even a few penguins out there that have colors that basically are for the same reason too. Now, this bird here is a bird that lives near the north. So if you were to look at a globe, the very top half of the globe is the northern hemisphere. The bottom half of the globe is the southern hemisphere, so north and south. And the very middle across the surface of the earth is a line called the equator. Okay, so the equator is usually where it's nice and warm. And then north, that's up here. That's where like Canada and Alaska are. It's a lot cooler up there than it is here in Long Beach, and that's where you would find puffins. So puffins live up here. Now, do you see where all the blue is? That's where the penguins live. So puffins and penguins both live in cold spaces, right? We know penguins live near the southern half of our planet, right? And it's very, very cold down here. A little less cold over there, but they do rely on cold water. So they do like it to be a little bit cold, but they still live in the different part of our planet, the two different cold areas of our planet. We have another observation here. One lives on ice and the other lives on rocks. Great observation. Let's take a look again at that comparison of those two birds, the puffin and the penguin. So if you look again at that picture, you'll notice the Adelie penguin living on or hanging out on white, right? That is ice. There we go. And then this one right here, the puffin, let me stand out of the way. You can see kind of the rocky, grassy area. Okay, so that is a really great observation. So the penguins, the southern hemisphere, there are some rocky areas that they'll live on, but they are not flyers. They're walkers and swimmers, and that's basically it. And so where they live, they're not going to be giant rock cliffs because they couldn't get on a giant rock cliff. In fact, there's some kind of rocky areas next to the ocean, and they have to be able to hop from rock to rock to rock. So it can't be a cliffside. It has to be a little bit tiered for them to hop, almost like stairs. Whereas puffins are flyers. Not only do they walk and swim, but they can fly too. So that's another difference that we can't really tell here in the picture, but maybe we can tell just by looking at the habitat. So this bird can actually fly onto a cliffside where it has its nest, because a nest on the cliffside is a great idea when there's lots of predators that might want to eat your eggs or even you. So that's one of the reasons why you'll see kind of this rocky, cliffy area. Great observation. Now, we talked a little bit about puffins. Let's take a closer look at penguins. So remember, penguins live in the southern hemisphere, and they're not flyers. They're walkers and swimmers, right? So then why do they have wings if they're just walkers and swimmers? Well, wings are used for swimming too. In fact, they both swim in the same way. They flap their wings when they're underwater, and that's what pushes them underwater, and that's how they swim. But when they're not underwater, when they're floating on the surface of the water, they both use those cute little feet in order to swim. Their feet, in some ways, are almost like duck feet. They are webbed, so they have toes, and between the toes is some skin. And that makes their feet like paddles for them to push water as they're floating on their bellies. Now, why don't they use their back feet like paddles when they're swimming underwater? Well, that's a good question. I bet you it's because it is more efficient to use their wings. Remember, we want to use as little energy as possible so we don't have to try to find more food. It's a lot harder to chase down food than it is to just save a little bit of energy. So now we know that they actually move in a very similar way. Very cool. And we see that there are different habitats. So let's take a closer look again at a different kind of penguin. All right. So not all penguins live in ice and snow. There are some penguins too that live on rocky beaches. So as you can see here, there's no snow to be found. And these are actually the kinds of penguins that we have here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. Just like you may have noticed in our exhibit when we first started our program here, that penguin beach did not have ice and snow. In fact, it's even an outdoor exhibit. It's a place where our penguins kind of get some fresh air and sunlight. And even on the hottest days here in Southern California, it's very similar to the hot days that they experience where they are from. Because even though we think penguins need to be cold all the time, they don't really have to. In fact, all they really need is cold water. So if you see right here, this water is pretty chilly. It's very similar to water here in Long Beach. And so that cool water is going to have all the food that they need. And if they get warm here, they can just hop into the water to cool off. Now, that's exactly what our penguins do as well. They kind of hang out on Penguin Beach, and if it gets a little bit warm, we have misters for them, but they can also hop into the water where it's nice and chilly. Ooh, excellent. We did have an observation that we already kind of talked a little bit about, but that puffins fly and penguins swim. Puffins also swim too, but they definitely, penguins absolutely do not fly. They are definitely not made for it, unless you were to see them underwater. I wonder if you could say that they fly underwater if they're flapping their wings, but not in the air, right? Penguins are not made for aerial maneuvers. Now, we do have an underwater camera here in our Penguin Beach as well. Now, these cameras are actually accessible to you. If you wanted to peek in on our birds, there they are. If you wanted to peek in on our birds, you can. All you have to do is go to our website, aquariumofpacific.org, and search for our webcams. Our webcams will bring up some of our most popular exhibits, like our penguins. We have a camera on Penguin Beach, so you can see them out of the water. We have this camera here underwater, so you can see a whole bunch of bellies. But if they are swimming underneath the surface, you can actually see them swimming around, so that's pretty cool too. Oh, there's one. It looks like it's bath time in our exhibit. So we made some really cool observations of both our penguins and our puffins and even our lorikeets. So these are some of the really amazing birds that we have out there. There are so many more birds to see. And did you realize that we were able to learn a lot just by looking at some pictures? Oh, they're swimming! Yes! Very cool. So now you can see them swimming underwater there. Okay, so we have McKay asking, do puffins have good eyesight? Ooh, good question. I'm not sure exactly how good their eyesight is, but it has to be good enough for them to not get eaten and also for them to capture prey. Now, here's the really cool things about puffins, though. They have to be able to see underwater to catch their prey and in the air so that they don't get eaten by predators out there in the air. So that's kind of fascinating because most animals are really only good at seeing in one space. For us, we're really good at seeing through air. Okay, that's kind of how our eyes were developed. But when you're underwater, if you ever have a chance to go underwater, and if you opened your eyes underwater, it might sting a little bit. But if you were open to, like, I've gone swimming in a pool before and I opened my eyes underwater. It's a little bit tougher to see. It's not as easy for me to see as when I am on the surface and I'm looking through air because our eyes are made for air, really. And a lot of fish eyes are made to really see well underwater, but if you were to take them out of the water, they wouldn't be able to see so well. So that's usually, it's either one or the other. But for puffins and penguins, they have to be able to do both. So that's really kind of a cool thing about their eyesight. Thanks for that question, McKay. Now we have a question from Jove. Do penguins and puffins eat rocks to digest food like other birds? That is a really fantastic question. Jove, you know, I'm not 100% sure. I do know that there are some penguins that do eat rocks. I'm not sure about puffins, though. Now, when they're eating rocks, it's not that they're digesting rocks. I think you know that based on the question there that you're asking, but just so we all know. So nutrition doesn't come from rocks. Rocks would just go in and out again. But if they have rocks in their bellies, when the belly moves, okay, our bellies move too. They squinch like this, and that helps with digestion. It helps to break down the food. If there's rocks in there, the rocks can bang together and help smash up the food, kind of almost like how we smash up food with our teeth. So in a way, the rocks are helping to kind of chew the food inside the bird's belly. And so if you look at them here, they don't chew. Right? They swallow their food whole. So having those rocks in their bellies is actually really helpful. So I'm not 100% sure about puffins. That's a great question. But I do know that there are at least some penguins who do that. Awesome. Thanks for that question, Joey. Thanks also for watching. Well, everyone, our time has come to an end here exploring the world of puffins and penguins. I think we could probably spend so much more time because oh my gosh, there's so much to say, so much to discover, so many things that we can learn by observing. Now, if you are interested in kind of looking at more birds, you know, a long time ago, I thought birds were kind of boring. I now think they're amazing because there's so many different kinds. And all you have to do is really look at them. What do you think they eat with the beak that they have there? Do they fly or do they not fly? Why do they have the colors they have? Are they big? Are they small? Where do they live? Is all of that kind of intertwined? These are all fantastic questions that you can ask, and you can maybe even find out yourself just by watching all of these amazing birds out there. Now, I do love that you joined us today. I hope that you can continue to join us. We have 4 more classes going on today, so hope to see you again. Thanks, everyone.